Aloha, and welcome to East Meets West, a cross-cultural journey, where we invite a professional from Japan and a professional from Hawaii to come on and talk about socially relevant topics that affect all of us, no matter where we live. Good afternoon. My name is Deidre Teagarden at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where our mission is to inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of our Nisei veterans. You can find out more about our center on the web at nvmc.org. We have a wonderful global audience with us today, and we thank all of you for being here. To our friends in Japan, we just want to say, O isogashi naka go sanka kudasari makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Today, we're inviting you into this discussion between Mr. John DeFries of the Hawaii Tourism Authority and Dr. Munehiko Harada of the Osaka University of Health and Sports Sciences, moderated by Board President Kyoko Kimura. Today's talk is all about sports. I know it's going to be a very lively discussion, so again, we thank all of you for being here. A few things before we start. As always, we love to take your questions and we'll get to as many as time allows. Feel free to type in your questions at the bottom left of your screen in that little question and answer box as they come to you. We also want to thank all of our sponsors for making this and all of our programming possible. You saw their logos as you logged on today. So again, we thank all of our corporate sponsors. Now, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists today, beginning with Mr. John DeFries, President and CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority. Born in Waikiki, DeFries was raised by elders steeped in Hawaiian culture. He has over 40 years of experience in the tourism and resort development industries. In 2020, he was appointed President CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority, and its mission is to manage tourism in a sustainable manner, consistent with economic goals, cultural values, preservation of natural resources, community desires, and visitor industry needs. In addition, he is President and Principal Advisor for Native Sun Business Group. He is an advisor and board member to many community organizations and has been a part of rare gatherings in Hawaii that highlight opportunities for leadership in sustainable living, human rights, and embracing Native intelligence. Previously, he has served as Executive Director of the Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association, and he has also led the Department of Research and Development for the County of Hawaii, which is responsible for stimulating economic growth in tourism, agriculture, and renewable energy. Our next panelist is Dr. Munehiko Harada, President of the Osaka University of Health and Sports Sciences. Previously, he was a full professor of sports business at Waseda University. He was educated in Japan at Kyoto University of Education and Tsukuba University, and achieved his PhD at the Pennsylvania State University and was a Fulbright senior researcher at Texas A&M University. He is president of the Japanese Association for Sports Management, former president of the Asian Association for Sports Management, chairman of the Japan Sports Tourism Alliance, and director of the Japan Volleyball Association. His research and teaching areas are sports management, sports marketing, and sports tourism. He also served as the chairman of the review committee to prepare for the bid plan for the Sapporo Winter Olympic Games in 2026. He is a published author of many books and papers in his field, including his most recent book, Regional Development Through Sports. And finally, our moderator today, Ms. Kyoko Kimura, President of the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center Board of Directors. She is also the Director of Owner Relations at Marriott Vacations Worldwide. She is a 30-year veteran of the resort and hotel industry, serving as General Manager of a luxury resort. She has served as the simultaneous interpreter for President George H.W. Bush and currently serves on the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association and is on the board of directors for the Hawaii Tourism Authority. In the past, she served as president of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, president of Japanese Cultural Society of Maui, and president of the Maui Hotel Association. I want to thank you all for being with us today. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in during this busy time. And Kyoko, I'm going to turn it over to you. I will be back at the end to help with questions and answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, teacher. So let's start talking about sports. Of course, we had to cancel all the sporting events last year, or most of them. John, what do you think? Like even the NCAA basketball tournament was still called Maui Invitational, but held in North Carolina. So we lost all those sporting events. What is the impact that we have
You
to the
know,
Hawaii's economy?
thank you, Kyoko, and I appreciate being here this evening. That economic impact of losing that basketball tournament to Maui was approximately 22.9 million. And economic impact is calculated by the number of visitors, the length of stay from each of the markets, the dollars that are spent per day, the number of local jobs that are supported, and ultimately the state tax revenue that's generated. So the loss of that event was just short of 23 million in terms of economic impact. And market value, or the exposure we would have received via television, social media, other digital platforms, as well as print media, was roughly $127 million. So in that one event,
One event.
we missed those opportunities and hope to regain them again next year.
Yeah, so we had to cancel the Honolulu Marathon, and we had to cancel tennis tournament, all those events, probably losing hundreds of
Xterra,
dollars. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So of course in Japan too, right? You had to cancel the professional and amateur events. What do you think is the loss of the economic impact of those sporting events?
Yes,
Harada?
negative impact of coronavirus was kind of a tremendous, a lot of professional sports got a huge damage, especially last year. But this year, at the beginning of this year, January, February, things are getting better. So people start thinking about restart the professional sports. However, the end of March until April, the Japan is affected by the fourth wave of coronavirus, especially the new type of coronavirus, due to corona mutant or corona variant. The things are getting worse day by day. So used to be government allowed it to professional sports to accommodate at the most 10,000 audience. But today, the government decided to reduce the number half, so 5,000 the most. And the ticket sale is the most important revenue source of professional sports. So that's really hard, the sports business, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, so stadium holds like 200,000 people, but you can have only 5,000.
That's right,
Oh,
exactly, right, it's
okay.
empty. Mhm.
Oh, that's sad. But so let's. So what's the latest of the Tokyo Olympic now? Is it gonna really happen, or with this you have like variant coming into Japan, and what about the spectators? What is the latest news?
Okay. The recent opinion polls tell us that 30% agree, 30% disagree, and 30% postpone the Olympics. But the torch relay has already started. So it's kind of we're already in like a beyond of the point of no return. So we have to go for it. Mhm. And so
So,
government will do it.
so it will happen.
Yes,
Hmm.
definitely. But it, of course, it's depending upon the fourth wave. If things are getting much worse, we have to. There's so many different options. Yes.
But they already decided not to have anybody from outside of the country as a spectator, right?
Yes. No foreigners can come, allowed to come to Japan.
Okay.
But the TV broadcasting is very well developed, so people can enjoy watching the Olympic Games, and that makes sponsors happy, I think.
One bright side of this Olympic for Hawaii is that for the first time, the surfing is going to be an Olympic event. John, can you talk a little bit about HTA's initiative about surfing?
Oh, absolutely. You know, an advisory committee made up of a cross-section of our community, both competitors, former competitors, people in the media production end of it, as well as those that are very culturally steeped in the tradition of surfing, have been organized into a committee. Now, the disappointment obviously is that Hawaii will not be able to send a citizens delegation or an elected officials delegation to represent the islands. So what we are hoping for is that one of our surfer athletes or several of them will be able to compete. Now, what's important for us is that the viewership that the Olympics will provide surfing and really reaffirm Hawaii as the world capital of surfing is a long-range plan here at the Hawaii Tourism Authority. And so we see the Olympics in Japan as being a kickoff for this, and it's our responsibility to sustain that global identity well beyond the Olympics, and we're preparing to do just that.
And going back to Japan again, like recently, the Olympic Committee president was forced to resign because of his comment towards the women. And recently, the Japan was placed 120th out of 153 countries in gender equality. Dr. Harada, do you think the society will change?
Before I move into that subject, I just want to let you know that today I just heard that the Russian national surfing team decided to set up the National Training Center at the northern part of Japan, small island. So believe it or not, you know, Russian start training surfing. So anyway.
That's the controversial island.
That's right.
Exactly. Who owns the land, right?
That's right. Japan claimed that's our island, but they did it. So anyway, so they are serious about training surfing, Russian surfer, anyway.
Okay.
So
yeah, and you can't get away from the gender equality question.
That's right. That's right. Gender equality issue is not my favorite subject, but after the president's mistake, the Ordinance Committee started recruiting the new board member. Now 40% of board member of Olympic Organizing Committee was dominated by women. And that was the same suggestion by the International Olympic Committee. So they strongly recommend all the sport governing body has to have a women's board member, at the most 40%. So things are getting better. And this kind of a incident, start Japanese people start rethinking about the gender equality. I think that's a good opportunity.
So especially in the world of sports, do you think men are more chauvinistic, or they look down women? Or like is that a society matter? Yeah. Like mm-hmm. they score really low on the number of female politicians too.
Mm-hmm. Right. Japan is only 14% of politicians is women. So that's the lowest in 7 nations, advanced 7 nations. That's sad story. But I believe things are getting better. It takes time, it's really based on the culture and the history. So, but this issue, Kyoko, better than I know, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think women should be on the sumo ring or anything, but it's just that the attitude towards equality or treat us not lower class is expected, I think. But even in the United States, John, like there was an incident of US gymnasts being abused. Do you think even in the United States there is a gender inequality, especially in the world of sports, because the male think their athletic ability is superior, so that we are looked down.
You know, the mindset of an athletic competitor is to achieve peak performance. And sometimes that leads to an insensitivity because the athlete is trying to hone that skill. And unfortunately, there have been too many instances where women have been looked down upon. It kind of reminds me of my own family. You know, I come from a big Hawaiian family, and all the men thought that they made the decisions and ran the family. But when I think back, my mother, my grandmother, my aunts were the ones that really operated the family. And so they established a good example for us as we were growing up. I will tell you that I think it is getting better. I recall when I entered tourism back in the mid-'70s, I ran a department of tour directors who took escorted tour programs through the islands, and my staff were 35 men. And I decided to hire the first woman in that department. And the men were very competitive in golf and tennis in particular. And the first woman I hired happened to be the state racquetball women's champion. And so when I brought her on, I could tell that she immediately intimidated all the men because she beat them all. She beat us all in tennis in particular. So, but I see that becoming, I think women have found their voice, rightfully. I think administrators of sports agencies and universities are much more sensitive to it. And we had a major champion in the late Congresswoman Patsy Mink, who co-authored what is known as Title IX, the congressional act that seeks to achieve parity between sports for men and sports for women. And so, you know, she was one of those early pioneers that refused to have women take a back seat to men in college athletics in particular.
So hopefully Japan is gonna move towards, like, I hope the women's soccer team who won the world championship had to travel economy class or something. Hope that'll change.
Yeah.
Hope that'll change.
Chairman decided to offer the business class after they won the championship. Yes.
After they won, but they went in an economy class. That's love it. But let's talk about some unique differences of the attitude towards sports in Japan and the United States or Hawaii. Something I thought I was interested in Japan, the physical education PE class is mandatory from kindergarten through the high school. And not only mandatory, but every student has to achieve certain skill, like a backflip on the bar or like the boat, or you have to be able to run 1,000 meters within 5 minutes. So it's very particular, like precisely organized PE class in Japan. And we don't have such thing. Mm-hmm. In the United States. There is no PE class in most of the public schools. What do you think is the purpose of these mandatory PE class in Japan?
Well, there's several reasons. Physical education is provide the students very, very important message, like healthy lifestyle, teamwork, and like a kind of attitudes formation. So in Japan, kindergarten has no phys ed class. It has sports class, but not phys ed. But elementary school, junior high school, it's very naturally interwoven to our lifestyle and the curriculum, and especially the extracurricular activities important in Japan, like high school baseball, every year, a lot of people are looking for the high school baseball championship. So it's very difficult to tell you why do we have a physical education.
And why we don't.
It's very difficult. So that's a part of the reason why I'm the president of Osaka Sports University. We train a lot of physics teacher and a lot of applicants come to our university. So that's it's a system of society, and I think that was a beauty of our culture, I believe. Sorry, that's all I can.
But when all the students do the same thing, some are good and some are bad, and the bad students get embarrassed. Is that okay in the PE class or in the education system?
To some extent, same thing happened in mathematics, arts, music, so some does good, some does bad.
But if your score in math is bad, nobody's going to know. But physical education in Japan, you fail in front of everybody.
Okay, so what's the point?
So I think as an educator of the physical education, you should think about the people who were not born with this athletic ability like me. So,
okay.
So let them choose what they want to do.
Well,
some has very good hand-eye coordination. Some is fast in running. Some has gymnastic ability, but not everybody can hit 200 yards.
Well, I can see the very similar thing in Hollywood high school movie in United States. All the jokes athletes are really, conspicuous.
Yeah. Lightning can jump.
That's hanging around and just the same thing. Yeah, so it's not just because of the physical education class.
Okay. And another topic that I thought it was very different is the college sports. Over here is very expensive, and for our marketing purposes too. College sports can cost so much, and the top football coach makes over $9 million. $9 million is there, and over 60 college pays more than $2 million for their football coaches. And then just to buy 30 seconds commercial on a NCAA basketball is over $1 million. John, do you think the sport is worth this much money?
It's all driven by television contracts and media exposure, and I think that the path that Hawaii has been on in being able to host some of these events, where the investment is made in actually becoming the location of the competition, actually translates much better of an investment than a 30-second or 60-second advertising. And for Hawaii, with the added value, especially for outdoor sports, is to be able to expose the beautiful natural surroundings. And so an event like the Ironman triathlon, outdoors has that exposure. We just completed in the month of January 3 professional golf events. Again, showcasing the beauty of Maui with the Century Tournament of Champions. And then the event came to Oahu and showcased the shoreline at the Waialae Country Club for the Sony Open. And then it ends up at Hualalai Resort with the Mitsubishi Electric. So I think making those investments there with corporate sponsors that the PGA Tour is able to assemble makes for a better investment than just a straight 30-second advertising spot. And I think we will continue to make such investments and hope to be able to resume our 2019 calendar of sporting events in the next 12 to 18 months as people become more confident in traveling and vaccinations continue to roll out at an acceptable rate. So I do think that aspect of it is a worthy investment, but purchasing outright advertising is a very delicate situation. There are times where it may be worthy to work that way, but I think the model that has evolved in Hawaii right now is working for Hawaii.
And don't forget the LPGA next week.
LPGA Lotte, the LPGA just called me, so.
Oh, okay. But on the other hand, Dr. Harada, like you're teaching a lot of top athletes, both in Waseda and Osaka, but I don't think any coaches are getting paid that much. Or even you just said the high school baseball tournament, the viewership is over 10% rating, but it's on NHK and nobody can sell the commercial. Why is that?
Well,
That's a great opportunity to sell commercial.
one thing I can say about college sports is USA is not global standard. Only USA can provide that amount of money to the sport coach. No other country can do it. Okay, so so what I'm saying is like a high school baseball championship, as you say, there's a lot of audience and a huge event, but it's a basically non-profit because high school is still education, part of education. So Asahi newspaper company and the Mainichi newspaper company support that big event, but nobody get any profit. Like Asahi Shimbun newspaper company send their employee as a volunteer to operate the event. So it's all non-profit and no broadcasting rights, no sponsor money at all. Very strange, but maybe that's because that's the reason why a lot of people enjoy that game because money, no involvement, no money doesn't involved in that.
Pure.
It's strange though. Strange to American people.
No, okay. Even over here, the Little League tournament is being broadcasted too. Not only high school.
Right.
And Hawaii won.
Yes.
From Maui. Okay, so John, I wanted you to talk about a lot of connections through sports between Japan and here in Hawaii. Like we've sent so many sumo legend or baseball players. I think we're gonna support the UH playing volleyball, playing against Japan college too. Could you talk a little bit about the history and cultural bonding between Japan and here?
I'd be happy to. You know, when I was a young boy, I remember going with my father. There was a sports arena here called the Civic Auditorium in Honolulu. And it's where it was the predecessor to the Blaisdell arena. And I remember going to my first sumo match and was just very intrigued culturally at how sumo proceeds as an event. And frankly, it captured my interest. And then what happened was, you know, Maui's own native son, Jesse Kuhaulua, who looked like this very tall Hawaiian football player, who later became, you know, Takamiyama, and now Azumazeki in retirement. he led the way. He was an inspiration to all of the people of Hawaii, whether you were of Japanese ancestry or not. I think all of us were proud of him. And as I began to understand some of the traditions around Shinto and sumo, you see the parallels between those traditions and the traditions of the Native Hawaiian culture. And much of it is related to ancestral worship and respecting one's ancestry. It's also related to the sites and locations that we find sacred, oftentimes mountains. And so I think, as I've come to appreciate the Japan traveler here, my observation is that they arrive in our community much more sensitive because that is the way of the Japan culture as well. So they easily translate, which is one of the reasons Hawaii is so popular, which is one of the reasons hula as a traditional practice is so, popular in Japan, as well as ukulele, and you see other traditions. So, but it was really sumo that for my generation captured our imagination. At that time, the grand champion, who was this very handsome, very formidable competitor, the grand champion was Tai Ho. And whenever we had an opportunity to see him, that was a highlight for me. So I see that kind of having a cultural foundation between two cultures will allow our relationship to grow because there is a mutual respect for one another and one another's cultures. And my hope is that the future of tourism in Hawaii in general, in other markets, will also have the opportunity to be built on cultural foundations as well, because beginning to understand each other, then tourism becomes kind of an instrument of cross-cultural relations, and our relationships are not reduced to being transactional only in an economic sense, that we actually take the time to learn about each other's traditions and cultures and language, and in that way move toward a better society in the world. And right now, the world needs that because things within our own country in the United States are so fractured politically, and around the world we see this fragmentation as well, accelerated of course by the pandemic and our inability to engage with each other face to face. But that will pass. And I see Hawaii as playing a very important role. I see Japan playing a very important role in helping to elevate the standard of cross-cultural relationships throughout the world.
That's true, very true. Do you think, Dr. Harada, that a lot of Japanese visitors are coming to Hawaii because of the sports that they want to play or want to watch, or how much of the Japanese visitors are looking for some sports in Hawaii as part of their vacation?
I'm sure more than 80% of visitors to Hawaii engaged in some kind of sports. But sports is very broad, watching top sports and enjoying, horseback riding, all kind of things are involved. But I'm sure the sports is a very, very important content of Hawaii tourism.
But are the Japanese regional areas using sports for tourism?
Yeah.
How are they?
Except a huge city like Tokyo and Osaka, most regional governments are facing two big crises. One is aging, and the other is depopulation. So a lot of municipal government would like to accept visitors to encourage them to spend money. So as a president of a Sport Tourism Alliance, I always preach them that you don't need a huge stadium accommodate more than 80,000, or you don't need a fancy arena to invite to the professional basketball. Just use everything you have. Like if you go to the village, only 5,000 people live. You know, they have a beautiful seashore, beautiful mountain, beautiful forest, you know. So use that resource as a content of sport tourism. So, you know, if you have a road, you can do like a cycling. And if you have a ocean, you can do a triathlon. And it's really, you know, if you use a lot of innovative power of a municipal government, you can use sport as a tourist contents. So Lower municipal government start establishing the organization called Sports Commission, and it's very popular in USA. We have more than 100 sports commission in Japan, and you know, every single commission is now working very hard to invite people by using sport as tourism contents.
Maybe because of the lack of facilities in the regional area, there are so many marathon tournament or marathon
Yeah, marathon was kind of a booming thing. You know, it hit the peak, and now runners are choosing which marathon event is better. So now it's moving to the different stage. It was a growth stage, but it's a maturing stage. And I'm sure only good marathon event survive.
What's the definition of good marathon? You know, the Honolulu Marathon is very popular for Japanese.
All depends upon the satisfaction. So every single marathon event does survey, and after that, they ask the participant, you know, just tell us what kind of thing we should do to improve the quality of marathon games. So it has been very successful. If marathon game doesn't do anything, you know, people start avoiding that event. So good marathon event constantly change their course, constantly changing the kind of a aid station, constantly changing, you know, everything to improve the quality. So that's a very healthy competition, I think.
So aid station is important for the runners.
Important, yeah.
Food, entertainment.
Entertainment, yeah, sure.
Okay. So for HTA, what kind of sports event you think, or we think, will benefit the community too? And what is HTA gonna support in the future?
You know, I touched on golf earlier. I will say that, you know, this past year, charities they raised 1.6 million for local charities here. So that philanthropic contribution is a direct benefit, separate and apart from why we do this from a marketing or branding standpoint. And so, you know, I think we'll continue to see golf play a major role. The Honolulu Marathon, as you pointed out, I think there were in 2019, there were 30,000 entrants, of which roughly 2/3, I believe, were actually runners from Japan. And in total, maybe 33,000 visitors that came. So the marathon will continue to be the lead sporting event between Japan and Hawaii. I look forward to the Ironman Triathlon on Hawaii Island coming back. The Maui Gym basketball tournament, we touched on early. I happened to arrive in this office in September, about the time they had to make the decision not to have the event in Maui. And I could tell by talking to their executives how disappointed they were. And so even though they moved it to the mainland, they kept the Maui name. And the court was designed around all of the imagery that they would have had here in Maui. We'll have a couple of football games, the Hawaii Bowl, which often pits our University of Hawaii team, if they qualify, against another mainland conference, champion. We'll see the Polynesian Bowl, which is a high school game comprised primarily, but not exclusively, of Polynesian athletes. And I'm sure everybody in Hawaii is aware that the Polynesian athlete at the college level and professional level has really emerged in very high profile situations, primarily because of the abilities and acumen Polynesian quarterbacks have been able to demonstrate of late. So HTA will continue to involve itself in that. The Xterra, which is for me, it feels more like a survival competition. That will be there. And then we're also evaluating tennis, potential tennis events as well. But those that are outdoors, those that will feature the beauty of our islands, will get our attention and will continue to be evaluated. And I can't wait for fiscal year 22 and 23 to start seeing these events return, which were preempted in the last 12 months.
And lately we were trying to get those professionals or the college players to do a clinic to the local.
Yes, that has been extremely popular, and for the local children in particular, to see some of their own heroes in person, visiting their school. The Tua Tagovailoa, the Alabama quarterback who is now in Florida, Miami, is obviously very, very popular, and having him back in the community in which he grew up, Marcus Mariota, the quarterback as well. So this creates quite a bit of excitement, but more than excitement, it actually is an inspiration, because our local children are able to see an image of themselves and people like themselves who grew up in their communities, who went to their churches, who went to their grocery stores, who now have a very high national and in some cases global profile. Michelle Wee as a golfer had that same impact to our local children. So we see that as being really important to inspire young children to seek high achievement, whether it's in sports or in academia or the arts. The sky is the limit is really the message that we want our local children to receive. And we now have spokespeople in the form of very gifted athletes who are also quite articulate and relate very well to our local children and our local communities.
So we're going to seek for those events going to benefit the local charities and showcase our beautiful islands, and children may look up to is what we are focusing on. How about in Japan? What do you think after this pandemic and sports tourism is going to change probably, or they have to change? What do you think the change is going to be?
Right. It's differently after the pandemic. The landscape going to be very different. Like, let's talk about Olympic Games. Tokyo got a lot of problems right now, but government is go for it anyway. And if you take a look at the 2024 Paris Games, next Olympic Games, in Tokyo Games, more than 60 companies support Tokyo Games as sponsors. But the Paris, only 3 companies has decided. They are facing big crisis. In 2013, Los Angeles and IOC already decided to next games in Brisbane, Australia. And it used to be a lot of bid competition, but there was no bid competition. So IOC believe that, number of countries who want to host Olympic Games reduce drastically. So we had a 2018 Rugby World Cup. That was very, very successful. So many people enjoyed that event. I think that's a last event of humankind experience in the history. I mean, after that, we cannot do the same event again in the future. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we have to be prepared for the different business model, selling the rights to sponsors or selling broadcasting rights and selling a lot of our tickets. That kind of a American type business model has to be modified a little bit. And I honestly tell you, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm sure the sports like outdoor sports, adventure tourism, or ecotourism, those kind of things, facing nature, like the surfing, we just discussed about, that very, good sports for the, era of after pandemic.
Why do you think the rugby was so successful, the championship? That was held in all over Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just in Tokyo, but...
Well, because Japanese team did very well, very well. Mm-hmm. Because they were best 8, that was the highest ever. So that's really, a lot of Japanese cheer for that.
So many New Zealanders were staying there for a month or 2 months.
But they speak Japanese. Yeah, it's a very global team. And so people very like to have international mixture. And that has been very successful.
I see. Is there any last word that John would you like to state?
Sure. The last Summer Olympics in Japan was 1964.
Yes.
And it stood out in my mind because there was a sprinter in the 100 meters by the name of Bob Hayes, who became known as the world's fastest human. And that was the first time I personally had heard that term and was fascinated by that idea. And indeed, he was fast. And Bob Hayes went on to become a celebrated wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys and a kickoff return artist, because nobody could catch him, for one thing. But at that Olympic Games, a very special bond was created that had a huge, incredible influence on the island of Hawaii, in particular the Kohala Coast. It was at that Olympic Games that Japan industrialist Noboru Goto, founder of Tokyo Group, hosted Francis Brown, who was, Francis Brown descends from a chiefly lineage of Hawaiians on the Kohala Coast. And Francis owned land in the Kohala Coast and had leased surrounding land. So he had amassed several hundred acres of land, but he did not have the capital to develop it. And it was at the '64 Olympics when he met Chairman Goto that the two of them forged a friendship and a partnership that led to the creation of what is today the Maunalani Resort. And until recently, Tokyo was the owner and managing partner of it. So these games, unfortunately, will be denied this kind of interaction in Tokyo, but the power of what happens when you bring people together who as the Brown family told me, that the connection that Francis Brown made to Chairman Goto had everything to do with recognizing that they had a common set of values. They had a very high appreciation for business, and they had a high appreciation for aesthetic value and beauty. And so the two of them were able to bring their cultural foundation as a Native Hawaiian landowner and an industrialist of Chairman Goto's stature, and have created a lasting legacy together at Mauna Lani. And so that's what I think of when I think of the Japan Olympic Games in 1964.
Thank you for the beautiful story. DJ and I were not born, right? Dr. Harada, your last words, do you think that that kind of beautiful story will happen this summer too?
Yeah, one of the important things of hosting Olympic Games is to what kind of legacy you can leave, after the games. Legacy includes like environmental legacy, social legacy, or sport legacy. For example, after the Olympic Games, the people who involved in sports increase or something like that, people start loving sports more. But I don't know about this coming Olympic Games because people are too busy preparing for the Olympic, and we have no time to think about the legacy. But I'm sure some kind of legacy will leave after the Olympic Games, like people's lifestyle. We have to think healthy lifestyle, more carefully, or sanitation, or some kind of in our the resolution of our the disease, or it's very difficult to explain, but I'm sure people's way of thinking will change after the Olympic Games, and I think this is a kind of important legacy of this coming Tokyo Olympic Games.
Thank you, DJ. Can we take some questions from the audience?
Yes, definitely. So first of all, thank you all. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on today. I think the conversation was incredibly enlightening. Some difficult conversations as well as some beautiful stories as well. So it's nice to have both. We wanted to follow up with something, Dr. Harada, that you said about, or me and Kyoko, you brought it up too, about failure, right? So failing in front of the group can be embarrassing. But at the same time, isn't sometimes failure good? Isn't it, don't you have to fail a little bit in order to succeed? And from a Japanese philosophical way, and maybe even from that Hawaiian cultural way, Mr. DeFries, how can we look at failure as something that is positive? In Japan, people help each other, and I think also with Hawaiian culture. But could you both touch upon the idea of failure as something that can be turned into a positive? And Dr. Harada, maybe we'll start with you.
It can be a life skill.
Mm-hmm. The failure means, could you just a little bit more explain about the failure?
So even if you fail, right? If you make a mistake or you're not the best in the class, how can we turn that around to make it something positive? The person asking the question spent some time in Japan and feels like in Japan especially, when you do fail, the rest of the team is there to pick you up and help you succeed. And like, what lessons can we learn from failure?
It's all about attitudes, the way of thinking. And I've been telling the students about the concept called the grit. Grit is a kind of a power of doing things until last moment, just do the best, So grit is a good concept. And if you try to tell people or train younger generation to cultivate the power of grit, I'm sure the failure can be a very positive, get the positive results. So it's all about attitudes, all about the way of thinking, So, but I don't know about what a failure means, Because
you never failed in athletics, so you don't know. But some students, some children cannot do the sakagari, right? But
Okay.
in the class, you are forced to do that backflip, and 3 out of 30 students cannot do it. So that's a failure. But important part is maybe the teacher's role is how to pick that up and let the others pick that up, or let the failed student learn the life skill to maneuver the failures.
But that is the beauty of education. You have so many things you can learn. If you cannot do good in sports, but you're very good with mathematics or good at music or arts, somebody must have something, good about, So I don't know if the failure is a right word or not.
Maybe not. And maybe that's an interesting answer right there. Mr. DeFries, what do you think?
So when I think back to my own upbringing, my own childhood, when I was going to grade school, we did have mandatory physical education tests. We had a 600-yard run, we had a 100-yard dash, we had to throw a softball. So as a Hawaiian who was typically bigger boned, than others in my class, I could probably throw the ball further, but I couldn't run as fast, right? So you kind of over time learn, to accept, what it is you can do. I certainly was not good in gymnastics, but this whole idea about failure. Back in 2014, I spent some time with a delegation from Google X, it was called back then. It was the research and development arm of Google, which is now rebranded to Alphabet. And they were here to come and see the departure of our voyaging canoe that was about to go around the world. And spending time with them in their business. Now, keep in mind, they have a $7 billion research and development budget. And one of the things I learned from them is this idea of accelerating failure, that failure was actually a process of discovery. And the quicker you fail, the quicker you could move on to, you could delete that option from the equation. So I do think, I go back to Dr. Harada's point about the mindset and the attitude, right? And that's what we need to teach our children, is how to convert whatever they perceive to be a failure or a shortcoming actually into something for them to pursue what it is that they are strong at and can build upon. And that has everything to do with education. It has everything to do with mentoring and coaching. And I've coached high school athletics before. So the strength of a team is really each teammate performing at the best of their level. And then the team benefits from the outcome. So, but I do think it has a lot to do with education and the way in which we teach how children should deal with setbacks like that.
I think that also answers another question that was texted in, and that is, first of all, the individual wanted to thank you for talking, Mr. DeFries, for talking about sports as like a cultural bridge, and that it can bridge not only our, Hawaii and Japan, but also our communities, within Hawaii and within the continental United States, because that's what we need right now. But the question to both of you is, again, those values of sports and how important they are in raising up a community and making sure that everybody understands the values that are important. And maybe if you could just both briefly touch upon the values of sports and how they can contribute to an engaged citizenship, both here in Hawaii and in Japan, Dr. Harada. So do you want to go first, Mr. DeVries?
Sure. For the younger generation, physical education is very important. Because, they can level up the physical fitness or strength of muscle, all kind of things. And the most important things is to teach them to be a good loser. Only one team can be a champion or get the gold medal. 99% of people are, they fail. But, don't think you're a failure. You are not shortcoming. You are just be a good loser. So it's all about attitudes. And so after you graduate the school, we encourage people to have an active lifestyle. We don't encourage sports because sports is a very limited concept. But active lifestyle includes so many kind of activities, including gardening or shopping, all kind of things. Just be active. So that's very important. Shopping in the mall. You walk a lot. Yes.
I like this, shopping as an activity. I'm going to tell my husband.
And I think I'm a good loser.
Sure. Yeah. Bring your credit card. So anyway. Active lifestyle is a very important concept, and sport is very limited, and it's a very powerful subject for the younger generation to learn to be a good loser.
Someone just typed in, there was talking about the internment camps in World War II. How important baseball was to those who were in the internment camps. Just a statement there, how important sports are.
The Canadian Asahi team became a movie in Japan too.
Did it?
Yeah, they made a movie.
Yeah, so important. Mr. DeVries, did you have anything to add to that about the value of sports?
One of the things I enjoyed most about coaching high school I was coaching high school football is being able to teach the qualities that will serve you long beyond, going back to Dr. Harada's point about sports being very limited. The things you learn in team sports in particular, or any sport for that matter, will serve you in all aspects of life, in business, but this idea of sportsmanship, of playing with honor, of being able, when you lose, when you're on the losing end, the distinction you have to make is whether your opponent beat you and deserved to win, or whether you beat yourself. And that distinction will serve you because it comes down to execution and of the things that you have prepared for and practiced for. But if you're not able to implement it, if you're not able to execute at a high level, you will risk beating yourself. And I can recall being on both ends of that, and you get very hard on yourself when that happens. When another team beats you outright and you've done everything to compete, there is an honor in that, and there's a respect that you gain for that opponent. You gave it your best, and on that particular day, the best wasn't enough. And so those are the things you learn. Frankly, those things serve me in business today, to the point that it's embedded in my makeup and in my very being. So, but I can trace it back to a time when I was a student athlete as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Before I turn it back over to you, Kyoko, again, we just want to thank you, Mr. DeFries and Dr. Harada, for taking time out of your schedules today to be with us and share some very enlightening concepts and ideas. And we hope that we all are able to travel again soon, and that Dr. Harada, you can come over here, and that we can all come over and visit you. For all of those watching today, thank you for joining us. Please make sure to check out our website at nvmc.org for our upcoming talks. We have 2 more this month, so please check it out. And again, visit our YouTube channel to see what other talks you may have missed. So Kyoko, I'm going to turn it back over to you for some closing remarks. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Both of you are super, super busy gentlemen, and thank you very much for taking the time for us. Dr. Harada, be careful with the variant in Osaka. I heard that 900 cases today or something. And thank you, John, for coming to talk to us. And see you at the board meeting.
Appreciate it. See you at the board meeting.
Aloha.
Aloha.